Hawaii, 1956. A sugar plantation town where one street decides everything. On one side, the plantation managers, the doctors, the bankers. On the other, everyone who works for them. A 9-year-old boy stands at the curb and watches a Cadillac pull away. Inside it, his classmate Jimmy, Jimmy's mother, and 3 boys from school, heading to a beach house for the weekend. He and his best friend Mike weren't invited. They'd been told why, to their faces, because you're poor kids. That afternoon, he asks his father, a brilliant man, one of the most educated men on the island, "Dad, can you tell me how to get rich?" His father puts down the newspaper, thinks about it, and gives him the only answer he has. "Use your head, son." The boy was Robert Kiyosaki. And the strange thing, the thing this whole series is about, is that the question got answered. Just not by the man he asked. Robert Kiyosaki grew up, he says, with 2 fathers. His real father, the man he calls his poor dad, had a PhD, degrees from Stanford and Northwestern and the University of Chicago, and rose to run education for the entire state of Hawaii. His best friend Mike's father, rich dad, never finished the 8th grade. And by the end of their lives, the man with the 8th grade education was one of the richest men in Hawaii, and the man with the doctorate died leaving bills. Was Rich Dad one real man, a blend of several, or a story invented to teach? Kiyosaki has never said, and the book works either way, because the 2 dads are really 2 voices arguing inside one boy's head, and they disagreed about everything. One said, "The love of money is the root of all evil." The other said, "The lack of money is the root of all evil." One told him, "Study hard, so you can find a good company to work for." The other told him, "Study hard, so you can find a good company to buy." But one habit split them most of all. When poor dad saw something he wanted, he'd say, "I can't afford it," and the sentence ended his thinking. Rich Dad banned those words in his house. He made the boys ask a question instead. "How can I afford it?" One shuts your brain off. The other puts it to work. At 9 years old, standing at that curb, Robert chose which voice to follow. But first, before Rich Dad, before any lessons, the boys tried to get rich on their own. And what they did next is the best scene in the book. For weeks, Robert and Mike went door to door asking neighbors to save their used toothpaste tubes. "Business secret," they said. The tubes piled up in a cardboard box by the washing machine until Robert's mother threatened eviction. Then, one Saturday, production began. The family hibachi at full heat. A steel pot on the coals. Milk cartons packed with plaster of Paris lined up on a long table. White powder everywhere. Because in 1956, toothpaste tubes were made of lead. The boys were melting them down and pouring the metal into little plaster molds. Robert's father came up the driveway with a friend and watched his son crack open a mold, and out dropped a lead nickel. 2 9-year-olds, covered head to toe in white dust, grinning like it was Christmas. "You're casting nickels? We're doing what you told us," they said. "We're making money." And to his lasting credit, the poor dad sat them down on the front step and gently explained the word counterfeiting, and then told them he was proud of them. "You're only poor if you give up," he said. "Most people only talk and dream of getting rich. You've done something." Then he gave them the tip that changed everything. "If you want to learn how to be rich, don't ask me. Talk to Mike's dad." Mike's father agreed to teach them, with one condition, delivered in 10 seconds, take it or leave it. "You work for me, I teach you. You don't work for me, I don't." No questions allowed. Robert had a softball game that day. He took the deal anyway. The pay, 10 cents an hour, 3 hours every Saturday, dusting canned goods in one of Rich Dad's little superettes. Excruciating, boring work, and week after week, Rich Dad never even showed up. By week 4, Robert was done. 30 cents a Saturday while his friends played baseball. Even his poor dad was furious on his behalf. Demand 25 cents an hour, and if he says no, quit immediately. So Robert marched over on Saturday morning to have it out, and Rich Dad made him sit in the waiting line behind his warehouse manager and his restaurant managers on a beautiful Hawaiian morning for a full hour. By the time the boy got into the office, he was nearly in tears. "You're a crook. You're greedy. You exploit your workers. You haven't taught me anything." Rich Dad rocked back in his chair and said, "Not bad. Less than a month, and you already sound like most of my employees. Because all of it, the boring work, the vanishing teacher, the hour in the waiting line, was the teaching. School teaches by talking," Rich Dad said, "but life teaches by pushing you around. And when life pushes, most people just take it. A few get angry and push back. At the boss, at the pay, at the job. Almost nobody stops to ask what the push is trying to teach them. If you think I'm the problem," he told the boy, "you have to change me. If you realize the problem is how you react, then you can change yourself, learn something, and grow wiser." Then he tapped the boy on the head. "Use this." And he took the 10 cents away. Same job, same hours, for nothing. A few weeks into working for free, Rich Dad bought the boys ice cream bars, walked them to a picnic table across from the store, and tried to buy them back. 25 cents an hour. Robert's heart jumped. $1 an hour. His brain screamed, "Take it." $2 in 1956, the richest kid in the world. The new bike, the glove, no one calling him poor again. $5 an hour, more than most grown-ups around them made. The offer had become ridiculous, and somewhere in the ridiculousness, something in both boys went quiet. They said nothing. "Good, Rich Dad," softly. "Most people have a price." And then he explained what he'd been doing, in the passage this book is most famous for. "Our whole lives," he said, "are run by two emotions, fear and desire. Fear of not having money sends you to work. Then the paycheck arrives, and desire takes over. All the things money can buy. So you spend it. And now you need the next paycheck. Get up, go to work, pay bills. Get up, go to work, pay bills." Give people more money, and they don't escape the loop. They just spend more, and the loop tightens. He called it the rat race. "It's the donkey and the carrot," he told them. The owner dangles the carrot in front of the cart, and the donkey pulls and never catches it, because tomorrow there's just another carrot. The trap isn't the job. The trap isn't even the money. The trap is letting fear and desire do your thinking for you. Fear pushing you out the door every morning. Desire spending the money every payday. And rich people aren't safe from it either, he said. Plenty of them play the same game with bigger numbers, more afraid of losing their money than they ever were of being poor. The way out starts with something almost embarrassingly simple. Be honest with yourself about which feeling is doing your thinking. Watch the feeling instead of obeying it. And when fear says, go get a job, work harder, ask for a raise, pause long enough to ask one question. Is there something I'm missing here? So, what happens when a 9-year-old works for free, with a head full of, is there something I'm missing here? He starts seeing things. One Saturday, Robert noticed Mrs. Martin, the store manager, doing something he'd never paid attention to. Cutting the covers off the unsold comic books. The top half of each cover went back to the delivery man for credit, and the comic itself went into a box, to be thrown away. Hundreds of comics. Free, worthless, invisible. Unless you were a kid who had stopped looking for a paycheck and started looking for an opportunity. The boys asked the delivery man if they could keep the ones headed for the trash. He agreed, on one condition: they couldn't sell them. So they didn't. They opened a library. A spare room in Mike's basement. Hundreds of comics, 10 cents admission. Read all you want from 2:30 to 4:30 after school. A bargain, since one comic alone cost 10 cents at the store. They hired Mike's studious little sister as head librarian for $1 a week. $9.50 a week, on average, for 3 months. And here's the part Rich Dad was actually teaching. The money came in whether or not the boys were in the room. They were at baseball practice, and the library earned. They were asleep, and the dimes kept coming. Two kids who had been paid 30 cents for 3 hours of dusting cans now had money working for them, which is lesson 1. The sentence the whole book hangs on. The poor and the middle class work for money. The rich have money work for them. Two dads, one question, and now you've seen the fork in the road. One father kept saying study hard, find a safe job with good benefits. Sincerely, lovingly, and out of fear. The other taught two 9-year-olds, with dimes and dust and ice cream, to watch the fear and desire in their own chests and think anyway. Kiyosaki spent the next 40 years walking the second road, and this book, the best-selling personal finance book ever written, is his account of what Rich Dad taught him on it. So the rich have money work for them, which raises the obvious next question. What exactly do the rich buy that everyone else doesn't? Rich Dad's answer begins with the most controversial sentence in the book, a claim that has made accountants angry for decades. That the biggest thing you will ever buy, the thing you were always told was your smartest investment, might quietly be making you poorer. Your house is not an asset. Next time, what that sentence means, and what the rich buy instead. Hawaii, the mid-1960s. The boy from episode 1 is 16 now, 7 years into Rich Dad's apprenticeship, and tonight at his own kitchen table, he's heading into the worst argument he'll ever have with his father. It starts the way it starts in millions of houses. His father, the educated dad, one of the most respected men in Hawaii's schools, says the sentence almost every parent says, the sentence you may have heard from your own. This house is our greatest investment. And his son picks up a pencil, draws the house, and starts adding arrows. The mortgage payment, the property tax, the repairs, the insurance. Every arrow pointing the same direction. Out. Dad, he says, this house isn't an asset. The way Kiyosaki tells it, it did not go well. A teenager telling a man with a doctorate that the biggest purchase of his life has been mislabeled his whole life. But here's the thing, one of them is right. And by the end of this episode, you won't need me to tell you which. You'll be able to settle it yourself with one pencil line. To understand who's right, start with a story Kiyosaki loves to tell. In 1923, some of the richest men on earth met at a hotel in Chicago, steel, gas, the stock exchange, the president's cabinet. 25 years later, the way the story goes, several had died broke. 2 had been to prison. 2 took their own lives. The richest men alive, and almost none of them stayed rich. Kiyosaki's point, making money and keeping money are 2 different skills. A job teaches you the first. Almost nobody teaches you the second. It's not how much money you make. It's how much money you keep. And keeping it starts with one rule. When the boys were old enough, Rich Dad gave them what he called the only rule they would ever need. Not a stock tip. One sentence. Know the difference between an asset and a liability, and buy assets. The boys thought he was joking. That's the secret. Rich Dad nodded. If you want to be rich, this is all you need to know. And because they were kids, he skipped the dictionary and gave them a definition you can carry for the rest of your life. An asset puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out of your pocket. That's the whole test. A little rental house that pays you every month. Asset. A boat that costs you every month. Liability. Not because of what it's called, because of which way the money flows. Kiyosaki says plainly that most accountants don't agree with his definitions, and he doesn't care. The dictionary version is for professionals. His version is for a 9-year-old, and that's exactly why it works. Because if the rule is this simple, a harder question appears. Why isn't everyone rich? Rich Dad's answer, because most people spend their lives buying things that take money out, while believing, with all their heart, that those things are assets. Rich Dad taught with pictures, so let's use his method. 3 pictures, 3 lives. Picture 1, the poor. Money comes in as a paycheck and goes straight out again. Rent, food, bus fare, taxes. In one pocket, out the other. Nothing sticks because there's nothing to stick to. That's survival. Picture 2, the middle class. More money comes in, and it doesn't stick either. It goes out through bigger doors. A mortgage, a car loan, credit cards. The middle class family owns more things than the poor family. But look at the arrows. Almost everything they own takes money out of their pocket. Every month. They don't own assets. They own payments. Picture 3, the rich. Same paycheck, maybe smaller. But some of it, every month, before anything else, goes into things that pay them back. And the money those things earn buys more things that pay them back. The arrows form a loop. And a loop, unlike a line, grows on its own. That's the entire chapter in 3 pictures. The poor spend on survival. The middle class spend on liabilities they think are assets. The rich buy assets first, and let the assets buy everything else. In episode 1, the trap was a 9-year-old's. Fear pushes you to work. Desire spends the paycheck. Kiyosaki says the adult version has more rooms, and he tells it as the story of a couple he meets everywhere he goes. The names change. The story never does. A young couple gets married. 2 paychecks. Small apartment. They've never felt richer. So they do the normal thing. The recommended thing? They buy their dream home. And the house arrives with friends. Property tax. A new car for the driveway. Furniture to fill the rooms. A credit card for the gaps. Then the raise comes, and the celebration is a bigger loan. Because now they can afford one. More income, more payments, never quite enough month left over. And they're working as hard as 2 people can work. Rich dad would ask, working hard for whom? Follow 1 paycheck. The first slice goes to the government, taken before they even see it. The next goes to the bank, mortgage, cards. What's left runs the house. They work for the company, the government, and the bank. Whatever survives is theirs. More money never fixes this. That's the part the couple can't see. Give them a raise, and the pattern simply spends it faster. Kiyosaki puts it in 1 line. Money only makes the pattern in your head run faster. And if you've dug yourself into a hole, stop digging. Now go back to that kitchen table, because you can read the drawing yourself. The house, the dream home, the one everyone congratulated them on. Mortgage, out. Property tax, out. Repairs, insurance, 30 years of interest. Out, out, out. Ask the only question that matters. Which way does the money flow? And the family home lands on the taking side of the page. By Rich Dad's rule, the sentence follows on its own. Your house is not an asset. His father wasn't persuaded. Almost nobody is the first time. Kiyosaki says people have challenged him on this one idea more than anything else in the book. And you can hear why in the room. It isn't an argument about arrows. The father had given his whole life to a house, a family, a safe and honorable path. The son, at 16, with somebody else's pencil, was calling that path mislabeled. High emotion, Kiyosaki says, is exactly what makes money hard to think about. Nothing is more emotional than the roof over your family. So hear the claim the careful way, the way he actually makes it. He is not saying don't buy a home. He's saying, don't call it what it isn't. A home is a place to live, a cost, usually the biggest one you'll ever carry. And if you count it as your fortune, you'll feel rich while the arrows quietly point the wrong way. And the deepest cost isn't even the arrows. If the house swallows every spare dollar, there is nothing left to start the loop. Picture 3 never begins, because every dollar is busy maintaining picture 2. Kiyosaki's own rule for wanting a bigger house turns the whole thing right side up. First, buy assets that pay you every month. Then let those payments buy the house. Which leaves the real question the argument was always about. If a paycheck doesn't make you rich, and a house doesn't make you rich, what does? Kiyosaki borrows his favorite measure from an eccentric inventor named Buckminster Fuller. and it's one a child can understand. If you stopped working today, how many days could you live? Not what your things would sell for, how long the money your assets earn would carry you. If your life costs $2,000 a month and your assets bring in $1,000, your wealth is half a month. And the day your assets cover your life completely, something quietly enormous happens. You're free. Your survival no longer depends on a boss. Every day of work after that is a choice. The rich buy assets. The poor only have expenses. The middle class buy liabilities they think are assets, which means the whole game now hangs on one word, assets, and on knowing what actually counts as one. Kiyosaki answers with a scene. In 1974, the founder of McDonald stood in front of a business class in Texas and asked what sounded like a trick question. What business am I in? The students laughed. Hamburgers, obviously. He told them they were wrong, and his answer, next episode, is the same one rich dad gave two boys in Hawaii. The difference between your profession and your business. In 1974, the founder of McDonald's, Ray Kroc, gave a talk to the MBA class at the University of Texas. Kiyosaki tells this story the way it was told to him. His friend was in that class. After the lecture, the students invited Kroc out for beers, and he came. And once everyone had a glass in front of them, he asked the room a question. What business am I in? The students laughed. Everyone on earth knew what business Ray Kroc was in. Finally, someone said it. Hamburgers. That's what I thought you'd say, Kroc said. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not in the hamburger business. My business is real estate. The room went quiet, because he meant it. McDonald's sells franchises, but Kroc understood from the beginning that the thing of lasting value wasn't the burger. It was the corner the restaurant stood on. The company made sure it ended up owning the land under its stores. Thousands of the best intersections in the world. The burgers, you might say, were how the real estate paid for itself. To this day, McDonald's is one of the largest owners of property on earth. One of the students never forgot it, and passed it to Kiyosaki, who never forgot it either. Because it's the sharpest version of a question Rich Dad had been asking him since he was a boy. And it's this episode's question aimed at you. There's what you do. And then there's what you're building. What business are you really in? Kiyosaki likes to ask people what their business is. They answer with their job. I'm a banker. And he asks, do you own the bank? No, I work there. That's the confusion. And almost everyone alive is living inside it. Your profession is what you do for money. Banker, chef, nurse, coder. It pays the bills, and it deserves your respect. But it isn't your business, for one simple reason you already know from episode 2. A profession is income, and income stops the moment you stop. Your business is the thing that doesn't stop. Your business is your asset column. So, Rich Dad's third lesson comes down to 3 words. Mind your own business. And it means something gentler and more practical than go be an entrepreneur. Kiyosaki is blunt about that. Most new companies fail, and running one is a hard life he wouldn't push on anyone. He's not telling you to quit. He's telling you to notice whose business your effort has been building all these years. Your employers, the governments, the banks, and to start giving some of that effort every month to your own. Keep your day job. Work it well. And quietly, on the side, start buying the things that pay you back. So, what actually goes in the column? Rich Dad's shopping list is short, and none of it is exotic. A small business that runs without you. Because if it needs you there every day, that's not a business. That's a job you own. Shares in companies, bonds, real estate that collects rent, royalties, money that keeps arriving for something you made once. Anything, in short, that puts money in your pocket while you sleep. And Kiyosaki adds one rule of the heart: buy assets you love. He collects rental buildings because he genuinely loves buildings, loves shopping for them, thinking about them, fixing their problems. If you don't love it, Rich Dad said, you won't take care of it. Now the other list, The things that feel like assets and aren't. The new car. It loses about a quarter of its value the day you drive it home. Kiyosaki's $400 golf driver was worth maybe $150 after one swing. The furniture, the electronics, the watch, the stuff a bank politely lets you list as assets on a loan form. His test for all of it is cruel and clarifying. If you had to sell it tomorrow, what would it actually bring? Things you bought to have are not things that pay. They're just expenses that stuck around. One more habit completes the lesson. Once the dollar goes into your asset column, it never comes out. Because the moment a dollar buys an asset, it stops being money. It becomes your employee. It works 24 hours a day. It never calls in sick. And it can keep working for your grandchildren. Which raises the honest question. What's the point of all these glowing little employees if you never get to live? You do. That's the part people miss. The rich aren't allergic to luxury. They just buy it in a different order. Kiyosaki tells it through his wife, Kim. She wanted a Mercedes. They could have financed one that afternoon, like anyone. Instead, she waited 4 years, while an apartment building they'd invested in grew until its rent checks could cover the car by themselves. Then she bought the Mercedes. Or rather, the building bought the Mercedes. And it kept paying for it, month after month, out of money that arrived while she slept. That's the order. The poor and the middle class buy luxuries first, on credit, with their own sweat, to look rich, and the debt quietly makes them poorer. The rich build the asset first and let the asset buy the toy. Same car, opposite direction of the arrows. And Kiyosaki says the weight changed what the car meant. It wasn't a purchase anymore. It was proof she knew how to build something that paid. There's one more piece of mind your own business, and it was Rich Dad's spikiest opinion. He hated the story of Robin Hood. Take from the rich, give to the poor, a lovely idea. He'd say, and here's what actually happened. When income taxes were introduced, England in the 1870s, America in 1913, they were sold as taxes on the rich alone. That's Kiyosaki's telling of the history, and his punchline. The rich responded by learning the rules, hiring the smartest accountants and lawyers, using companies and the law to protect what they built, while the cost of it all slid down onto the middle class, the very people the idea was supposed to help. The biggest bully in your financial life, Rich Dad told the boys, isn't your boss? It's the tax man, and he takes the most from the people who understand the game the least. You don't need the mechanics. They're dated. They vary by country. And this book was never a tax manual anyway. What you need is the lesson under them. The rules of money are learnable, and the rich are simply the people who bothered to learn them. Not smarter, not better. Just literate in a language nobody teaches. And Rich Dad would add, if you know what you're talking about, you're much harder to push around. His whole philosophy of it fits in one exchange. Poor Dad urged Robert to climb the corporate ladder. Rich Dad chuckled and asked, why not own the ladder? And now watch the whole episode happen to one man, because the boy from the 10-cent lesson grew up. And this is where the apprenticeship pays off. Mid-20s. Robert Kiyosaki is out of the Marine Corps and selling copiers for Xerox. A good job, exactly what his educated dad wanted for him. And every payday he stares at his check, at the taxes taken out before he ever touched it, and hears Rich Dad in his ear. Who are you working for? Who are you making rich? So 1974, as it happens, the same year Ray Kroc asked his question in Texas, Robert starts minding his own business. He doesn't quit. The opposite. He becomes one of the best salesmen in the company, because now the job has a purpose. Every commission has an assignment before it arrives. Buy assets. Hawaii real estate, small and unglamorous at first, deal by deal, dollar employee by dollar employee. 3 years later, his little company was earning more than his Xerox salary. And then came the Porsche. His colleagues assumed he was blowing his commissions. The classic move. The luxury bought first. He let them think it. The truth was the opposite. The commissions had bought assets, and the assets bought the Porsche. Same rules as Kim's Mercedes. The car in the parking lot wasn't spending. It was proof the loop had closed. So, your profession funds your business buys your freedom, and the freedom, eventually, buys the toys. But notice the step this episode skipped past, the one everybody asks about. Deal by deal, we said. Where do the deals come from? How does someone with a salesman's paycheck find money-making opportunities everyone else walks straight past? Rich Dad had an answer for that too, and it's the boldest claim in the book. The rich don't find money. They invent it. Singapore, the 1990s. A young newspaper reporter is interviewing Robert Kiyosaki, by now a famous author, and she has a confession. Someday, she tells him, "I'd like to be a best-selling author like you." And she means it. Her writing is good. He's read it, and he tells her so. She has the degree, a master's in English literature. She has the talent. Something just isn't happening. So he gives her his honest advice. There's school here in Singapore that trains people to sell. Take the course. She freezes. Are you saying I should go to school to learn to be a salesperson? A professional? A trained writer? Sell? She starts packing her briefcase. And Kiyosaki picks up her notepad and points at what she wrote at the top. Robert Kiyosaki, best-selling author. Best-selling, he says quietly. Not best writing. I'm a terrible writer. You're a great writer. I went to sales school. Put the two together, and you get both. She walked out into the humid morning, furious. And her fury is this episode, because the world is full of brilliant, talented, educated people who stay broke. And Kiyosaki's explanation is one line long. Often, it's not the smart who get ahead. It's the bold. Remember the lead nickels? 2 9-year-olds melting toothpaste tubes in a driveway, and a father explaining what counterfeiting means. Rich Dad never forgot it. Years later, he told the boys, "That day, you were closer to the secret of money than most adults ever get." Wrong method. Right instinct. Because here is Rich Dad's strangest lesson. Lesson 5. The rich don't find money lying around, and they don't earn most of it an hour at a time. The rich invent money. Money, he'd say, isn't a thing at all. It's an agreement between people. And new agreements can be created by anyone who trains the most powerful asset there is, the one between your ears. What does that training look like in practice? Kiyosaki's word for it is options. When something goes wrong, a deal falls through. The money isn't there. The bank says no. The average person knows exactly one move. Work harder, save, and wait. The trained mind asks a different question. How many ways can I think of through this? If you're waiting for conditions to be perfect before you act, he says, you're like a driver waiting for every traffic light to be green for 5 miles before starting the trip. And opportunities, Rich Dad insisted, aren't rare. They're just invisible. Because great opportunities are not seen with your eyes. They're seen with your mind. Here's what inventing money looks like with real numbers. Kiyosaki's own story, from the early 1990s, when the Phoenix economy was on its knees and everyone else was hiding. Houses that had been worth $75,000 were going begging. And down at the courthouse, where foreclosed homes were auctioned, the same house could sometimes be had for $20,000. Kiyosaki borrowed $2,000 from a friend for the deposit. Then he ran a simple ad. House worth $75,000, yours for $60,000, no money down. The phone rang off the hook. The house sold in minutes, with Kiyosaki himself carrying the buyer's loan. The way he tells it, everyone left happy. The friend repaid with a bonus, the buyer with a bargain, and Kiyosaki holding an IOU that would pay him interest, month after month, for 30 years. Total working time, about 5 hours. Nothing was built. Nothing was manufactured. He saw a gap between two prices that everyone else was too frightened to look at, and drew a brand new asset into his column. Out of agreement, nerve, and a $2,000 loan. That's the boldness the title of this episode is about. And one honest note here, because this is the corner of the book where people get burned. From a distance, bold and reckless look identical. Kiyosaki's own rules are the part the imitators skip. Start small, know the numbers cold, and never confuse a deal you understand with a gamble you're preying on. It's not gambling if you know what you're doing, he writes. It's gambling if you're throwing money into a deal and praying. His friend with the spooky house understood. Everyone laughed when he bought the ugliest, creepiest house on the block, until it turned out he hadn't bought a house at all. He checked the records. The house came with 4 extra building lots nobody had noticed. He tore the house down, sold the land to a builder for 3 times what he paid. Seeing with the mind, not the eyes. So boldness can invent money. But boldness built on what? That's lesson 6. And it explains the strangest resume in this book, Kiyosaki's own. In 1969, he graduated and landed a job his educated dad was proud of, sailing oil tankers for Standard Oil. Good pay, 5 months vacation a year, a career ladder waiting. He quit within a year to join the Marines and fly helicopters. His educated dad was devastated. Rich dad congratulated him. Back from Vietnam, he quit again and took a job selling copiers at Xerox. Not for the paycheck, and not because it was comfortable, because he was painfully shy, terrified of rejection, and Xerox happened to run one of the best sales training programs in America. He knocked on strangers' doors until the fear wore out. Then he moved on. See the pattern. Every job was chosen for the skill, not the salary. Ships taught him international trade. The Marines taught him to lead people. Xerox taught him to sell. His educated dad believed what schools teach: specialize, go deep, climb one ladder. Rich dad's advice was the opposite. Know a little about a lot and pick your next job for what it teaches, not what it pays. Because here's the phrase Kiyosaki says explains half the talented struggling people you know. A consultant friend gave it to him. Most of them are one skill away from great wealth. The gifted writer who can't sell. The brilliant artist Kiyosaki knew who blew a $35,000 inheritance on one glossy magazine ad because he'd mastered his craft and never learned a thing about business. McDonald's, Kiyosaki likes to point out, does not make the world's best hamburger. Almost anyone can cook a better one. McDonald's is simply the best on earth at selling and delivering an average one. The world pays for the whole system, not the best ingredient. Talent is the ingredient. It's almost never the missing piece. Which brings us back to the reporter in Singapore, still furious in the humid morning air. Notice what was actually asked of her. Not to abandon her novel. Not to become someone else. One course, one skill bolted onto a decade of talent. And by Kiyosaki's arithmetic, great writer plus can sell equals the thing she said she wanted more than anything. The price wasn't money. The price was her pride. She would have had to sit, a master of literature, in a classroom she considered beneath her. She wouldn't pay it. Most people won't, and that's the real cliffhanger of this book. Because by now the method is sitting in plain sight. Buy assets. Mind your own business. Train your mind. Learn to sell. Start small. Be bold. None of it requires genius. And Kiyosaki insists none of it is complicated. So the last question is the one this whole series has been circling. If it's this learnable, why isn't everyone rich? Rich Dad had an answer. 5 things stand between people and the life they say they want, and not one of them is in your bank account. They're all in you. And the first one, you've already met. It was there in episode 1 at a picnic table in Hawaii, melting 2 ice cream bars. Next time, the 5 obstacles. 4 episodes in, you know the method. Buy assets, not liabilities. Mind your own business. Pay yourself first. Learn to sell, start small, be bold. Kiyosaki insists none of it takes genius. 5th grade math will do, he says. And he means it. Which leaves the question the whole book has been walking toward. If it's this simple, why isn't everyone rich? Rich Dad's answer. Because knowing the way isn't the same as walking it. Between every person and the money they say they want stand 5 obstacles, and not one of them is in your bank account. They're all in you. And the first one, you've already met. It sat on a picnic table in Hawaii, in episode 1, melting 2 ice cream bars, while a rich man offered 2 boys more and more money, and taught them to watch the feeling in their own chests. Fear, the oldest character in this series. Here's what Rich Dad knew about the fear of losing money. Everyone has it. The rich have it too. In all his years, Kiyosaki writes, he has never met a rich person who has never lost money, but he's met plenty of poor people who never lost a dime, because they never risked one. The difference was never the fear. It's what the fear is allowed to decide. And it's okay to be a coward about money. Kiyosaki is cheerful on this point. Everyone's a hero at something and a coward at something else. He tells of a friend's wife, an emergency room nurse. Show her blood and she flies into action. Mention investing and she flees the room. Show Kiyosaki an investment and he's calm. Show him blood and he faints. Nobody's brave everywhere. For the money cowards, Rich Dad kept a gentle rhyme instead of a lecture. If you hate risk and worry, start early. Time forgives almost everything. But most people, he says, lose because they're so afraid of losing. They play it safe their whole lives. Big house, big car, tiny investments, playing not to lose instead of playing to win. His favorite medicine was a story. Rich Dad loved Texans. When Texans win, they win big, he'd say. And when they lose, it's spectacular. Go to San Antonio, he told the boys, and look at the Alamo. A battle that was lost, completely, bravely lost. And Texas turned it into a battle cry and a monument. Remember the Alamo. Texans don't bury their failures, Rich Dad said. They get inspired by them. He told the boys that story every time he was nervous before a big deal. Not because he wanted to lose, but because he knew what he'd do with a loss if it came. That's the whole teaching in one line. Failure inspires winners. Failure defeats losers. Losing is part of winning the way falling is part of learning to ride a bike. The rich just fall forward. The second obstacle talks. Constantly. Rich Dad called it the chicken little in every one of us. The voice, yours, or a helpful neighbor's, that cries the sky is falling every time you're about to act. Kiyosaki tells the story of his friend Richard. Richard came from Boston to visit, saw what Robert and Kim were doing in Phoenix, and got excited. They spent 2 days finding him a bargain. A little 2-bedroom townhome. $42,000 in a market where its twins sold for $65,000. He bought it that afternoon and flew home thrilled. 2 weeks later, he backed out. His neighbor had told him it was a bad deal. His neighbor, who had never bought an investment property in his life. There's a name for what happened on that porch. Buyer's remorse. It comes for everyone, Kiyosaki says. And it always sends the same messenger. Somebody with no experience and total confidence. A few years on, the way he tells it, that townhome was worth $95,000 and renting for $1,000 a month in season. Richard's $5,000 start at freedom went to whoever wasn't listening to a neighbor. Cynics criticize, Rich Dad said. Winners analyze and listen for cynicism's favorite disguise, because it doesn't always sound frightened. Sometimes it sounds practical. I don't want to fix toilets, people tell Kiyosaki, dismissing 30 years of rental income in one sentence about plumbing. His answer, neither does he. That's why he hires a property manager. The I don't wants, Rich Dad said, hold the key to success. The exact place your objection lies is usually the place a solution is waiting to be bought, hired, or learned. Say I don't want and the door closes. Ask then, who does? And it opens. Rich Dad's cure for the inner chicken was cheerfully brutal. Do what Colonel Sanders did. The man who Rich Dad loved to recall was down to nothing at 66 and heard no more than 1,000 times before someone bought his chicken recipe. Do that to your chicken little. Fry it. The third obstacle wears a disguise so good that most people who have it are proud of it. The laziest people, Kiyosaki says, are the busy ones. Too busy to look after their money. Too busy to look after their health, sometimes their marriage. Staying busy is the most respectable way ever invented to avoid something you don't want to face. Deep down, he says, the busy person knows exactly what they're avoiding, which is why they snap at you if you bring it up. He knew a neighbor, flat broke, whose garage was so full of toys for his kids that the car couldn't fit. Nothing saved for college, nothing for retirement. A new credit card in the mail and off to Las Vegas. I'm doing it for the kids. Busy, generous, exhausted, and avoiding. The cure sounds scandalous. A little greed. Kiyosaki says most of us were raised to feel guilty about wanting. We can't afford it. Stop thinking about yourself. But Rich Dad banned, I can't afford it, precisely because it's how a lazy mind lets itself off the hook. The question that cures laziness is the one from episode 1. How can I afford it? Asked while daring to want something. What would my life look like if I never had to work again? Without a little honest wanting, he'd say, there's no engine. Progress comes from desire. Guilt just sits in the garage with the toys. The fourth obstacle isn't dramatic at all. It's just an order of operations. Rich Dad asked young Robert, when your father pays his bills, who gets paid first? Everyone else, Robert said. And who gets paid last, if anything's left? He does. That, said Rich Dad, is why he struggles. The habit, everyone first, yourself last, feels responsible. It's the habit of almost every decent, hardworking person. And it quietly guarantees the asset column starves. Rich Dad paid himself first, fed his asset column before any other hand reached his wallet, and then let the pressure of the remaining bills do what pressure does. Force him to think, hustle, and invent. He wasn't preaching unpaid bills. He paid them, on time, every month. He just refused to be last in line for his own money. Remember the old comic book ad? The 98-pound weakling getting sand kicked in his face? That, Rich Dad said, is what bill collectors and taxmen do to people, forever, if you let them. He used the bullies the other way. Their pressure was his gym. Every month it made him financially stronger. The way weights make you physically stronger. Kiyosaki borrows the phrase from an older classic, The Richest Man in Babylon, and calls it the #1 difference between the rich and everyone else. Not income, order. The last obstacle is the expensive one, and it catches exactly the people who sailed past the other 4. What I know makes me money, Rich Dad said. What I don't know loses me money. Every time I've been arrogant, I have lost money. Arrogance, in his definition, is ignorance wearing confidence, believing that what you don't know doesn't matter. Kiyosaki says he meets it constantly in the money world. People blustering through conversations. Not lying exactly, but not telling the truth either. Because the truth is, I don't know, and they can't say it. Markets build arrogance directly, and the antidote costs almost nothing. When you don't know, and you will always not know something, say so to yourself at least, and go find an expert or a book, which, not coincidentally, is what you're doing right now. Kiyosaki's own tell for the arrogant. They never read, and they never listen. They are, after all, already the center of the universe. So there they are, the 5 wolves between you and the gold. Fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, arrogance. Notice what they have in common. Not one of them is about money. Every one of them is about you, which is the worst news and the best news in the book, because it means the whole fight happens on ground you control. But naming the wolves isn't the same as walking past them. Rich Dad didn't leave the boys with a diagnosis. He left them with training, the daily practices that turn a person who knows the method into a person who does it. And it begins in the mountains of Peru, with an old miner, and the best one-line answer in the whole book. Next time, the finale, the training, and where the gold is. In Peru, Kiyosaki once asked a gold miner, a man who'd spent 45 years at it, how he could be so confident of finding a gold mine. The old man's answer became one of the book's best lines. There is gold everywhere. Most people are not trained to see it. Kiyosaki says the same thing happens to him in real estate. He can walk a neighborhood and find 4 or 5 promising deals in a day, while the average person walking the same streets finds nothing. Same streets, same gold. Different training. Last episode named the 5 wolves that stand between people and the life they say they want. This episode, the last one, is the training. What Rich Dad actually left the boys with. The daily practices that turn someone who knows the method into someone who does it. And the first practice has nothing to do with money at all. Kiyosaki once asked a young swimmer chasing the United States Olympic team what fueled it. The 4 a.m. mornings, the missed parties, the years of it. She said, "I do it for myself and the people I love. It's love that gets me over the hurdles." That's practice 1. Before the money, a reason. Kiyosaki is blunt that without one, the road is too long and every step will feel too steep. No formula survives contact with a tired Tuesday. And a real reason, he says, is built from both directions. The don't wants. His own list includes a father who worked his whole life and missed the football games, and still couldn't pass on what he'd earned. And the wants. To be free, to control his own time, to have money work for him. Deep, emotional, personal, and slightly embarrassing to say out loud. That's how you know it's real. He wanted to be free by 40. It took until 47, with losses along the way. The reason is what kept him standing up. Practice 2. With every dollar and every hour, you're choosing what to invest in first, and Rich Dad's order was fixed. Mind before money. Kiyosaki tells of a friend whose apartment was burglarized. The thieves took the electronics and left all the books. He means it as a joke and a diagnosis. Most people's spending follows the thieves' taste. So put things in your head on purpose. Learn one formula for making money. Kiyosaki's first was buying for closed houses. Learned in a weekend class and practiced for years. Then, once it's mastered, go learn another. In a fast world, he says, it's not what you know that pays anymore. What you know grows old. It's how fast you learn. And guard the doorway. Choose teachers who have actually done the thing, and be careful whose warnings you let in. Learn from everyone, Kiyosaki says. He has friends who've taken vows of poverty and friends worth millions, and both teach him, but don't take directions from frightened people, however much you love them. Richard's neighbor from last episode is always leaning over some fence. The training is knowing which voices get a vote. Here's what the training looks like when someone actually gives it. Kiyosaki's favorite kind of story, in the season's last parable. A friend of his had a 16-year-old son who wanted a car, and the easy moves were sitting right there. Buy the boy a car, or let him drain his savings. The father did neither. He gave his son $3,000, with a catch. You can't buy a car with it. Turn it into $6,000 in the stock market, and the 6 is yours for the car, and the original 3 goes back to your college fund. The boy got lucky early, then lost nearly everything within days. And that's when something unexpected happened. He got interested. He read every book his father gave him and went to the library for more. He started reading the financial pages like other kids read the sports section. Down $2,000, he'd stopped caring much about the car. He found a game more interesting than the prize. That's the best $3,000 I've ever spent on his education, the father told Kiyosaki. I'd rather he lose it at 16 than learn nothing and risk everything at 45. Every practice in this episode is hiding in that story. A reason. Learning before earning. Losses as tuition, not tragedy, the Alamo lesson. One generation down. The gold, it turns out, isn't the 6,000. It's the boy at the library. The last practices are the smallest, and they all say the same word. Go. Start small. Kiyosaki calls it planting seeds in the asset column. Some grow, some don't. and the first ones teach you more than they earn you. Make offers. You don't know the real price of anything until someone can say yes or no, and most people never find out because they never ask. Walk one neighborhood 10 minutes a month and watch for change, because a bargain plus change equals opportunity. He found some of his best deals jogging. Shop where the crowd isn't. When supermarkets hold a sale, people rush in. When markets hold a sale, people run away. And profits, he says, are made when you buy, not when you sell. And through all of it, the one law with no exceptions: action always beats inaction. The gold doesn't come to the trained eye. It comes to the trained eye that goes. There's one last lesson in the book, and Kiyosaki says if he could leave a single idea behind, this is it. It came from Rich Dad, who gave money away even when he was short. Whenever you feel you don't have enough of something, money, a smile, help, love, give some first. Teach what you know, and you'll understand it twice as well. He didn't offer it as mysticism, just as 50 years of results. The tide you start tends to come back in. Which is, if you think about it, what a book is. A man had two fathers, took notes for 40 years, and gave the notes away. And that's where this series ends, where it began, with two voices. Because you have both dads in your head now. You always did. This book just introduced you formally. One voice says, play it safe. I can't afford it. Don't stand out. What if you lose? It loves you. It's afraid for you. The other asks, how can I afford it? What's the lesson? Where's the asset? Who can teach me? Every day, at the kitchen table, at the mailbox, at the store, one of them speaks first. Choosing which one to listen to is the entire book, and nobody can make the choice but you. So here's a first step small enough for this week. Pay yourself first, even if it's almost nothing, and put one thing in your head on purpose. It could even be this book. It's short. It reads in a weekend, and it's earned its place on this channel's shelf. Whatever the arguments about the man and the details, and there are some, the refrain at its heart has changed how 40 million people look at their own front door. The gold is everywhere. Now you're trained to see it.